that landed in the Dingle Peninsula in a very interesting spot, because from a maritime point of view, a very well chosen spot, which they must have known. They wouldn't have just found it, so that there was obviously a lot of knowledge about Ireland and the geography of Ireland. Well, they landed there, about 900 of them. It was really a token thing, but nevertheless it was an expeditionary force. And the purpose of it was that if they landed there, that they would inflame. There's always been the theory about Ireland that if a European power arrived, that all the Irish would come flocking to it, and you'd inflame the whole island, they'd kick the British off the island. That was always the imaginings of the French and so on. So that was the thinking, and they arrived at a place called Smerwick, and I'll point it out to you on the map a little later on. And they set up a defensive perimeter, and they built themselves a little earthen castle, which was a semicircle around that, and a very deep set of cliffs, and down below, really very safe anchorage. So it was a perfect spot, defensible. And then they would wait for the Irish to get to know they were there, to come and join them, and they would sally forth. Well, what they didn't realize was just how successful the English had been, and how devastated the country was. There was hardly any food, because the English had engaged in a scorched earth policy. They burned all the crops. In those days, potatoes were not known in Western Europe, let alone in Ireland. It was only later that they became. So therefore they used to burn the crops. And by the way, the reason potatoes became popular is because they were the one crop that would survive a marauding English army, because they had to be dug out of the ground, whereas so contrary to popular belief that the Irish got into potatoes for other reasons, that's why they got into the Irish, as a defensive mechanism against the British. Anyway, the papal army, if you like, continental, call it whatever you like, although it was flying under the papal colours, and was led by a Jesuit who was typical of the counter-revolution that was going on at the time. Remember now, this was in the time of Calvin, and so on. It was like really the height of the religious wars. Well, the 900 garrison became isolated, and the British marched on them all the way from the southwest and besieged them, and pretty soon they had to give in. And they surrendered to the best that the British had at the time, which included Sir Walter Raleigh, was present at Smerwick, and Mountjoy as a junior officer, and also quite a lot of interesting people, including the poet Edmund Spenser, and of course Richard Bingham. They all sort of were there. It was kind of like one of these like battles of the West that you were there. The Battle of New Orleans, and later you became famous in other areas. Well, the papal army, they were mostly Italian and Spanish conscripts. They weren't really very. They surrendered, and they marched out in colours and all the rest of it. And the British immediately massacred them, every one of them. They massacred the entire 800 and something of them, right there on the grass, and threw their bodies overboard. And you can still feel a chill when you go there. I've been there a number of times. You get a very strange feeling standing on that ground. It's one of the strange things. Now, that's one of the sort of the horrible points during that period. But what I've often wondered is why Grace O'Malley never went to their rescue. Because she had the wherewithal to do that. And she could probably have at least given them an escort out of Tralee Bay, out from behind Smerwick, and at least got them home. And I always wonder why she didn't do that. Maybe they never asked, or maybe she offered and they refused. Maybe they never imagined that the British would massacre them. I don't know. But I just often wonder about that. So I didn't want to let her off without some little smack that might And I think I'm running over time, so I'll
Short answer.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that there was some musical. Is there a play about this woman?
Yeah.
What's it called?
The Pirate Queen. And it opened in Chicago last year, I think about last October, and did very well. And then it opened on the 23rd of March, just like a week or two ago, in Broadway, on Broadway. And it is written by the same people who wrote Les Miserables and what was the other ones? Miss Saigon. So I mean, obviously, like the top-notch musical. So it's right in the top notch of musicals. So it will do extremely well. I wouldn't be at all surprised if you won't see a movie pretty soon on it. But I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is just the tail end. That's just the modern manifestation of something which happened almost as soon as she died. That great mythology that grew up around her. And for her, over a period of over 400 years, to have caught the imagination of the Irish to that extent, it's an extraordinary thing. So anybody, as I said when I was talking about St. Patrick's during the St. Patrick's Day, he must have existed, and he must have been an extraordinary man, because the Irish love those kind of people, and they don't invent them. You know, they just don't, because they would disappear very quickly. So therefore, she had to have created a large disturbance in the ether. There was something truly extraordinary about that person, not just because she was a woman, but just as a human being. She obviously was an extraordinary human being. As I say, the poets of the centuries always seem to grab onto her as their spiritual salvation throughout the darkest periods. So a lot of the songs and music and so on. So it's.
Did she help the poets?
Did she?
Yeah.
No, I don't think she'd have much time for poets. She probably. Pardon?
Just inspiration.
Yes, of course, because she was such an extraordinary warrior figure. But no, she wouldn't probably have had a lot of time for them. Although I've no doubt that she was very gentle and with them and appreciated them. And I know that her brother, Richard Peabra, was very, very dear to her. Very dear to her. So she would have had, maybe a woman's instinct or just a warrior's instinct, that these were people that were very different to her, but had a very important role to play in the human psyche. There's not much. She endowed the church a lot, so she was obviously religious. She wanted to make sure that they'd know about her when she got to the next place, which is interesting. You will see again, traveling around west of Ireland, you'll see certain plaques and certain little things endowed by Gráinne Mhaol. She gave very generously to Borris. Beside Rockfleet, we were talking earlier, I was giving you directions. You probably will see a sign on that road for Borris, which is an interesting name too. And if you remember Parish Oul, the old Oul Eagle is there again. It's in English it's Borrishshule, Borris, But the Boris and Boris is a holy place. So it would have been, and if it's well worth the trip if you're going from Newport out to Achill, absolutely get off there. And the little abbey and the graveyard and that whole thing there, it's ruined of course, is extraordinary. You get a feel, you get a very powerful feeling there. And she endowed, and so did Tibbin Lung. Tibbin Lung actually became even more noticeable, is more noticeable in a lot of the stuff that he donated land and treasures and helped the monasteries and the monks and so on. But Burshul is right beside Rockfleet. It's kind of just around the little bay, and it's kind of interesting that they're both there. Traditionally, she's believed to have been buried on Clear Island, though, out where she really loved and was born.
Did she die a little before the Kinsale or a little after?
After.
What relationship did she have with Hugh O'Neill?
A very interesting one. She did not take sides. Now, she was an old person, but she actually fought with O'Donnell. She and O'Donnell did not get on well, Red Hugh O'Donnell. And O'Donnell was from Donegal, and he was a wild man.